This is the second option in our 551st prediction. The 550th prediction we made for the two fire signs of 1 Kings 18, which now appear to have become US presidential election surprises, was for the 2NC Pentecost, which used to be on Heshvan 21, which is 50 days inclusively from Tishri 2, first fruits, 2NC first fruits, which is the first of the week after the festival Sabbath of Tishri 1. It's not the first of a literal week. It's a Pentecost that's counted from a festival Sabbath rather than a weekly Sabbath, because the definition in Leviticus 23 of the Pentecost is that you count 7 weeks starting from an interposing Sabbath, and it's not stated whether that is a festival Sabbath or a weekly Sabbath, and there's both types. So it's deliberately ambiguous, and when God does that in the Bible, it means that both possible meanings will be true, because God is perfectly capable of explaining himself in an unambiguous and precise way if that's what he wants to do. And when there's an ambiguity in a statement from a perfect person, it means the ambiguity isn't a mistake, it's not a lack of precision, it's deliberate in order to say two things with one set of words, which the Bible is full of that type of thing. Not only ambiguity, but also cryptic, and also jokes, puns, and also translinguistic puns. For instance, Bethany means house of dates, the thing that you eat in Hebrew, but we are the house of dates, mainly incorrect, and that is a humour that isn't lost on the inventor of both Hebrew and English, Jehovah God. That was the 550th, and then we realised that you could no longer count the Pentecost, the 2NC Pentecost, like that, because Tishri 1 is no longer Rosh Hashana, because we are now moving to a Heshvan 1, new secular year, because of the upcoming Passovers, firstly of the Watchtower, then of the rest of Christianity, and then of Adam himself, and of Satan actually, and the demons of the dragon. So all these Passovers, just like in Egypt when there was the Passover and the sons of Israel left Egypt, the calendar was changed because actually there was a secular rulership change from Pharaoh, who was an agent of Satan, to Jehovah himself, who became their king, and then later appointed, well, the people chose Saul, but God chose David, and then made an agreement with David, eventually a covenant, that his one from his loins would sit on his throne in the kingdom. Likewise, that whole thing is going to happen again. We're now at that point in the kingdom when there'll be a secular rulership change to God from Satan, or actually, to be more precise, to a vassal king chosen by God rather than a bunch of corrupt governments chosen by Satan. It's incredibly ironic that if we're now right, this fire sign which kicks this all off is just a few days before the US presidential election. But on the other hand, it's not so ironic when you look at the state of that election and what's at stake. Without getting too political, what's happening is that if Trump loses by a little bit, he'll take down the system, and now if Clinton loses, she'll probably take down the FBI system. Well, I shouldn't say that, but normally when one gets investigated by the police, one doesn't attack the police, one cooperates, but that's not what's going on. So there's an apocalypse, a revelation that needs to occur. We all need to really see the spiritual workings of government, and that process appears to be underway as democracy is unravelling in the States. And would you believe that we actually evangelised that into Iraq? Who would want that form of government? So I did get political. Since we don't have Tishri 1 as Rosh Hashana, and since we define the Pentecost as counting from the first festival Sabbath after Tablet Shattering Day, which I detailed in the last video, it's 40 plus 40 days after the late 1NC Pentecost, because Moses went up the mountain on the Pentecost and he was there for 40 nights and 40 days, and in the greater meaning that could be 40 days or 80 days. and then he broke the tablets, which is the end of the law of a church. 2 tablets for 2 churches, the first church of the first presence and the first church of the second presence, which was the watchtower. So that's where the 2NC, which is Pentecost, which is the installation day for a 2NC church, and we're a 2NC church, Second New Covenant church, comes from. And rather than it being this Pentecost running from Tishri 2 to Heshvan 21, we thought either it could be a weekly Sabbath, in which case this year it would run from Tishri 5 to Heshvan 24. That wasn't correct. And before Heshvan 24 expired, we realised no, it's going to be the Heshvan 30 date. And the interposing Sabbath is the festival Sabbath of the Atonement Day, Tishri 10. And so you count the Pentecost from the day after that Sabbath, which is Tishri 11, 50 days inclusively till Heshvan 30. So we're now going with the Heshvan 30 2NC Pentecost, which is the 7th 2NC Pentecost that the attendant is asked to go back to, 1 Kings 18, and that's when he sees the rising mushroom cloud like a man's palm coming from the sea, whilst Elijah is doing a mushroom, putting his head in between his knees and saying, go and have a look for one of these. So this cloud rising from the sea, we think there are 2 fulfillments, because answer me, is what Elijah says to God, and the people say Jehovah is Lord, so there are 2 answers given. Now in the original account, the fire came from Jehovah, but the contest was between Jehovah or Baal, who can send the fire. And in the Bible everything is fulfilled. And so if the original account had Jehovah sending the fire, then in the greater meaning it's Baal or Satan who sends the fire. But Jehovah sends the answer as to when that fire is. And it's a terrorist attack, a satanic terrorist attack, actually arranged directly by the demons, because it's the stone that's cut not with hands from the mountain of the administration of mankind. So it's like a rogue element, rogue demonically possessed element of the political administration of mankind who does this thing. Although one can make all sorts of theories as to who would want that to happen, given the proximity of the US election right now. So the new prediction is between the 29th of Heshvan and Chislev 1, so that we go one day either side of the Pentecost on Heshvan 30, because of time zones and because of inclusive exclusive counts, and because in the contest itself the fire came down between the 2 evenings, which was actually in the next day after the contest from a calendar standpoint, but in the same day as the contest from a Hebrew daylight day standpoint, because the 24-hour day ends at sunset and the daylight 12-hour day ends at darkness, and sunset comes before darkness, and the time between sunset and darkness is between the 2 evenings, the evening of the 24-hour day and the evening of the 12-hour day. Alright, so for those reasons we go from the 29th to Chislev 1, Heshvan 29. In Gregorian terms that's November the 3rd to the 6th, and the presidential election is November the 8th. So, but the reason I went for this was Haggai 2 has repeat 1 small she, and that counts as 3 times. And because repeat 1 is 2 and small she is a further statement, there's another time all these descriptive statements add. And I thought, well, this is great. The old Pentecost was Heshvan 21, the new one is Heshvan 24, 3 times between them, nailed it. But what I didn't do was consider the next part of the verse, which is, and I am rocking the heavens, the earth, the sea and the dry. I mean, I considered it, but I thought, well, the 3 times would run before the rocking, but it doesn't have to. It takes 3 times plus the count of the rocking until there is a rocking. I'm not quite sure which, but certainly there's a possibility that you should add the 2 up. And the heavens and the earth, sea and the dry, counts as 3 for earth, sea and dry, and heavens is either a dual or a plural, and the terrible Hebrew's dual number only is ever used and understood to be dual when it's quite obvious it's referring to 2 things, such as 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 ears. I've never seen it. Whenever one doesn't actually know whether it should be 2 or more, or plural, nobody knows whether it's a dual or a plural, which I guess there's nothing wrong with Hebrew, it's just our understanding of the language. So we don't know whether the heavens, Shammah, Shamayim. We don't know whether it's plural or dual. Nobody seems to know. I don't know. I mean, how many heavens are there? There's the heavens of the atmosphere and the heavens of the universe, and then there's the heavens where Jehovah lives, which isn't necessary. So I suppose there's the heavens of the stars, the heavens of the atmosphere, and there's the heavens which we think is the dark matter actually in the universe, where the angels live, which isn't the same as the. I mean, they are outside of. We get this right. They're outside of space, but inside of time. The angels, and God is of course outside both, which is why He can prophesy the future. So I'd say actually on that basis it is a plural, not a dual. And in which case heavens counts 3 times rather than 2 times. If it was dual, it would count as 2 times. We count plurals as 3 times. So that would be 3 for heavens, and then earth, sea and dry is another 3. That's 6. You add it to the 3 of repeat, 1 small she, that's 9. And that would take you from Heshvan 21 to Heshvan 30. So I realised basically that the count on which I based we better go with Heshvan 24, if you actually count the whole sentence, you can get to Heshvan 30 just as well. So I thought, maybe we didn't need to go for Heshvan 24. Then I looked at Daniel 10, where Daniel mourns for 3 weeks, and then he gets a vision on Chislev 24. Now, if that's the case, if he had a vision, if he started mourning because there's a fire sign on Heshvan 24, that would be mourning for 30 days, which would be 4 weeks. But whereas if there was a fire sign on Heshvan 30, he'd only mourn for 24 days, which could be 3, and is in fact 3 whole calendar weeks plus a bit more. So actually Daniel 10 tells you, because Daniel only mourns for 3 weeks, and in the greater meaning that is a mourning mourning for 3 weeks in Jewish tradition is from the minor fast on Tammuz 17 to Tisha B'Av, which is the 9th of Ab. And so it's to do with losing your temples, when the temple was, the constant feature stopped, I think. Not only in Solomon's temple, but also in Zerubbabel's temple. So it's a form of your previous, a mourning for your loss of your previous form of worship. And that mourning would only occur after a fire sign, when some Jehovah's Witnesses realise, oh dear, Gordon was right, governing body is in fact rejected. And so, understanding that, you apply the greater 3 weeks of Daniel's mourning to a period after the fire sign. And so I saw from Daniel 10 that it had to be Heshvan 30 and not Heshvan 24, because otherwise he'd be mourning for 4 weeks rather than the 3 that the scriptures say he mourns for, Daniel. Right, so those were the 2 reasons that got me thinking it's got to be Heshvan 30. But there's more, which is really, easier with hindsight, of course, but if you define, as we have, the 2NC Pentecost to be a 50 count, or a count of 7 weeks actually, after an interposing festival Sabbath, then you can't say, well, now we decided it's going to be after an interposing weekly Sabbath. You can't really do that. If it's going to be, Christianity is supposed to be a virtualized equivalent of the Mosaic, of Judaism, basically. So if you virtualize it, then it's running off festival Sabbaths rather than weekly Sabbaths. And without changing the definition of it, if you abolish Tishri 1 as a festival Sabbath, you just have to go to the next one, which is Tishri 10, which I didn't really want to do, because I've never seen a Pentecost with such an enormous great gap, a 10-day gap or more between the tablet shattering day and the interposing Sabbath. In particular, it's possible to have 2 weekly Sabbaths in that gap. But nonetheless, that's how it's defined. If it's defined as a festival Sabbath, then you just go to the next festival Sabbath. So that's what we've now done. And so what that means is that the 2NC Pentecost this year, instead of being Heshvan 21 or Heshvan 24, is Heshvan 30. That would then be the 7th 2NC Pentecost that Elijah asks his attendant to go back to after the first one on 2009 Chislev 21, which was when we were appointed over some of the kingdom, which is when he came and said, well, there's nothing at all. And we know there must be a Pentecostal fulfillment to 1 Kings 18. And it's the last Pentecost date that there could be for the 2NC Pentecost this year, other than the late 2NC Pentecost, which it cannot be because of other chronological considerations. And this is our 551st prediction, and there's only 551 prophets at the contest. Elijah plus 450 of Baal plus 100 reticent prophets of Jehovah. So I don't really have a basis to make any more, thank goodness, of these predictions. That's another reason why it should be Heshvan 30. But then we came up with, I'm speaking to Frank in the States, we came up with I've always been trying to find out what's this mourning for 30 days for Moses on the plains of Moab? What's the greater meaning of that? Because what the Jews did is they had a 40-year wilderness penalty, but at the end of that penalty, actually still within it, they weren't in a wilderness. They were in the plains of Moab overlooking Jericho. So it wasn't a wilderness. They were with their brother Moab, who's the son of Lot, and Lot was the nephew of Abraham, so in Hebrew terms they're brothers. They're basically with their brother, and they're overlooking Jericho, so that they can see where they're going and they know who they're with. They're not in a wilderness. And so it stands for a period of 30 days. In the literal account, it was during the 40 years of the wilderness penalty. But in the greater meaning where we are now, there are 2 wilderness penalties. One for 40 years on the watchtower when they gave up after they failed in 1975 to get the right date for the end of the world, although it wasn't a bad guess. And that ran actually from 1976 Tishri to 2016 Tishri, L30. And then you have this weird period of a month, which I initially thought was the plains of Moab, but it isn't, when there is no new year, because the new year doesn't begin Tishri 1 this year, it begins Heshvan 1. So there's a sort of intercalary month, but which is actually in between calendars, which isn't really part of the previous secular year, and neither is it a part of the next secular year. It's between 2 secular years. But then there's the Laodicean wilderness penalty for 40 months that ends on Tishri 30. So you then have to have a fulfillment of this plains of Moab, this extra 30 days. So we now run that from Heshvan 1 to Heshvan 30. So you finish your wilderness period. You then have 30 days on the plains of Moab, and then you cross over the Jordan into the Promised Land. And so that would be Heshvan 1 to Heshvan 30, we thought. So that was another reason to go for Heshvan 30. But possibly the most dynamic and exciting of them all is Isaiah 30:26, which says, "The light of the moon will become like the light of the sun, and the light of the sun will become 7 times as bright, like the light of 7 days, in the day of the big slaughter, when the towers fall." In the previous verse it goes on about big, small, there'll be rivers, there'll be hills, mountains, there'll be rivers, streams, and the whole thing is big, small, big, small. And it's basically saying there's a day of small slaughter, which was 9/11, when the towers fell in New York, 2 of them. But 2 towers fell, actually more towers than 2, but the 2 twin towers fell. There's a big slaughter, and that happens 1 moon compared with 1 sun, which is a year plus a month. And then the sun 7 times as bright, the light of the sun, so that's 7 years. Like the light of 7 days, you take a day for a year in biblical prophecy, or for a month, or a month for a day. You can make any of these substitutions, so long as they're all astronomical cycles of some form. So that can count, it could count if you take literally, very literally, as 15 years and 1 month. Or it could count as 16 months if you take the sun to actually be like the moon, or it can count as 16 years if you take the moon to be like the sun. But let's take it to be 15 years and 1 month, because that's the most straightforward count, 1 moon compared with 1 sun, and then 7 times of the sun, and then 7 days. Like the light of 7 days. When it's a like, it's as if you put the 2 on the table. So if the moon is like the sun, you put them both on the table, and it's a sun plus a moon, a year plus a day. And when the light is 7 times as bright, like the light of 7 days, you've got 7 years there, 7 times, because 7 times, okay, it's 7 times as bright multiplicatively in terms of intensity, but the word times can mean, in English, and I think also in Hebrew, it can mean a repetition as regards a cycle, or a repetition as regards lifting the dial up to make it more intense, or more bright. So it's a pun. It can mean 7 years, 7 periods of time, or 7 times more. And that pun works in English, and in that sense English is rather like the third language of the Bible, as our Austrian apostle Mike says, because that doesn't work in German, but it does work in English. So 15 years and 1 month, not 2. Now this is the light of the sun and the light of the moon. So it's true solar and true lunar, not dependent on a calendar, but dependent on astronomical observation. So if you go 15 true solar years from 9/11/2001, you end up 9/11/2016. Okay, then you go 2 true lunar months, there's 29.5 days each, that's 59 days. That takes you to November the 9th, 2016. But it's 1 moon, not 2. So it's got to be before November the 9th that we get the day of the big slaughter, which is caused by the 2nd and 3rd fire signs when the towers fall, because we are predicting these fire signs to occur from the Hudson, or with a cloud above the Hudson, on Midtown, more or less, New York, Manhattan, and from east of London round about Dartford, from the Thames on Dartford. So there aren't that many towers in Dartford, but there are quite a few in Manhattan. So what we're saying is there'll be a bigger slaughter than 9/11 if we interpret Isaiah 30 correctly, and it will occur on or before the November the 8th presidential election. So there's all sorts of political theories one can think of why that might occur, but that's what we predict, and it's quite astonishing that you can get that from Isaiah 30, 25 and 26. But that's the best interpretation we can make of it. And if we go past November the 9th, you could possibly stretch it to say it should be Gregorian, but the light of the sun and the light of the moon should be true lunar, true solar, I reckon, because that's an astronomical feature, not a calendar feature. So really, if you get to November the 9th, if you finish the presidential election and this hasn't happened, then we've misinterpreted it. But there is a count, certainly, whenever there's the word 7 times, or any number in fact in a scriptural verse, then you have to make a count of it. And so there is a count on that verse, and you've got suns and moons, so it's months and years. It could have been 8 years, 7 days and 1 month. It wasn't. So now we say it's 15 years and 1 month, not 2. That could be wrong, and it could be 16 years. But the trouble with that is that why call it a moon and then interpret it as a year? Possible, but I think the most likely one is the one we've gone for, which is a big slaughter before the US presidential election occurs, or finishes at least, or before the vote counting. And as I said, with various other proofs we have, it's got to occur now, not in a year's time. It'd be too late for a load of other scriptures. So in other words, it's pretty much got, that has to be the right interpretation, or all our chronologies up the spout, which wouldn't be the first time. Alright, so that's a beautiful one. One other thing, which convinced me actually also, Heshvan 30 is a Sabbath, a weekly Sabbath. Now the Pentecost is a festival Sabbath. And what that means is Heshvan 30 is both a weekly Sabbath and a festival Sabbath, or it is a great Sabbath. Now it says in the account of the woman bent double in Luke 12 or 13 for 18 years, it says that Jesus was teaching in the Sabbaths, and he sees this woman bent double, bent together, and he releases her. And then there's this whole thing about, and the presiding officer of the synagogue says, you should come and cure, there are 6 days on which work should be done, come and cure on them, don't cure on the Sabbath. And Jesus said, hypocrite, doesn't each one of you lead his bull away from a stall and water it on the Sabbath? I mean, he was just playing politics, this guy. He completely ignored the Holy Spirit and wanted to attack Jesus because Jesus was outshining him because he had the Holy Spirit with him. Classic politics. And that's the contest between Christianity and politics, basically. Politics being the method of rule of Satan, and Christianity and the law of God being the method of rule of Jehovah. through Jesus. And he's teaching in the Sabbaths, plural. This woman's bent together. So bent together as at a festival. At a festival, the whole church huddles together in the body of the woman. The woman is the church. Body of the woman, bent together. We're all together. So it's a festival. So she gets released at a festival, but it's in the Sabbaths, plural. So weekly Sabbath and festival Sabbath, and it's the festival Sabbath of Pentecost, which is at the end of weeks. But weeks is also called the Sabbaths because it's a count of 7 Sabbaths. So it's double Sabbaths because it's weeks, the festival of multiple Sabbaths, 7 of them. It's double Sabbath because it's both a weekly and a festival Sabbath. And not only that, it's in the Sabbath year, the 7th secular year under Jesus Christ, starting from 2010 Nisan 1, his first regnal year. Although the secular year starts from Tishri 1 until 2016 when it started from Heshvan 1. So really it's a way better interpretation to have, and also the attendant of 1 Kings 18, he sees this rising mushroom cloud upon the 7th, and 1 Kings 18 is deliberately ambiguous. It doesn't say the 7th day, 7th month, 7th year, it just says the 7th, which means it's going to be a multitude of different 7ths. It's the 7th 2NC Pentecost that the attendant goes back to. It is the 9th 2NC Pentecost of the kingdom, and Elijah was competing against 9 Pentecosts of prophets of Baal. But it's the 11th Pentecost of the contest, and there were another 100 prophets or 2 Pentecosts worth of prophets of Jehovah. So this would be the 11th 2NC Pentecost, would be the right time for the contest to end, but we have to get the right date for that Pentecost. So it's sufficiently Pentecostal, and it's a festival, so the woman's bent together. They're all meeting. See, at a festival you must have everybody in the church is meeting at least one other person, or the woman is bent together so that every part of her body is hitting some other part of her body. And it's double Sabbaths all round, which is either the festival of weeks, the festival of Sabbaths, or Pentecost, which is the same festival, or it's because it's both a weekly and a festival Sabbath, or because it's both a weekly and an annual Sabbath. So that is a really good fit for Luke 13 and this woman bent double for 18 years. Finally, the Jericho account, you go round in Jesus' regnal years for 6 years. That takes you from 2010 Nisan 1 to 2016 Nisan 1. Then you go around for 7 months. That takes you to Tishri 30, and you don't go round for 8 months. So in other words, you stop going round before Heshvan 30. So we have to get this right. Stopping going round doesn't necessarily mean there's a sign. It means we predict the right date for a sign, at which point we stop going round in circles, because our circles have been, every time we come up with a date, we have to throw it away and come up with another date, which is just going round in chronological circles, which we've done for 10.5 years now. So we have to get it right before the end of this month. And I don't think I've been making any more prophecies, because I can't, because I'm on the 551st, and in any event, the 551st extends to beyond this month. So unless I'm making a prophecy during another prophecy, which I have done before, very unlikely, basically, according to Jericho, this must be it. So those are the reasons we moved it to Heshvan 30, and that's why we think we finally got this. Thanks for watching.